Talk of imposing new wealth taxes has been all the rage in the last couple of years as Western politicians who need more of your money now want to impose this new kind of tax. The latest politicians to talk about it are in Quebec, Canada, and I'm going to tell you how much of your wealth they want to take. From the Montreal Gazette, an article about how the Quebec Solidaire promises wealth tax to raise $2.65 billion a year. I always like how it's never about hardworking Canadian families are going to have $2.65 billion less to put into the economy. They're going to have $2.65 billion of their hard-earned dollars less to spend, and nobody should have taken it in the first place because it wasn't theirs to take, and it's not fair. But the story is the ends justify the means with all of these wealth taxes. That is what the story is. And as long as the government has more money to inefficiently distribute, hey, we're bringing in more money. A jewel heist brings in money too, but just saying. If it's your first time here, I'm Andrew Henderson, founder of Nomad Capitalist. We're a boutique consulting firm that helps 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors legally go where you're treated best. That includes finding places in the world where you can either move now or get residence and citizenship to be able to move later when your politicians go nuts and start taking more and more of your money. Because they're not already taking enough, right? I mean, it's not like you're paying 1% tax living in Canada. So the party that wants this says that the rate would stand at 0.1% per $1 million for those with net assets of $1 million to $10 million. So let's talk about this. This new wealth tax in Canada would raise 2.65 billion Canadian dollars in revenue by imposing a wealth tax on the wealthiest 5% of Quebecers. A Move co-spokesperson, I guess of this party, Gabrielle Nadeau-Dubois, insists would not cause an exodus of capital or a headquarters from the province. And so one thing we've told you about is how there's always a slippery slope with these kinds of taxes. All right. We've said that they're going to introduce new taxes because existing taxes aren't enough. You can only fidget with income tax enough. You can impose new levies, you can impose new surcharges. Places like California are trying to do that. But eventually you just have to have new taxes and new ways to impose taxes, like retroactive taxes, de facto taxes. But here they want just a straightforward wealth tax that's going to be on the top 5%. But the point of that is, remember when, not that long ago, it was the nasty 1% and they were taking all the money? Remember when it was just the millionaires and billionaires from next door, Vermont, where they were complaining about that? Now it's the top 5%. And so, okay, that's still a pretty good story to sell to the voters. 95% of you won't pay anything. But 5% is not a handful of people. It's not only the fabulously wealthy. It's some pretty everyday people. I mean, top 5% is not that insane, but it's exactly what we've told you. It's going to go from a handful of millionaires and billionaires to the 1%, down to 5%, and then who knows what, right? In the UK, they wanted to hit everybody with £500,000 or more. That's like anyone who owns a house, basically, at least for now. And so that's the first thing. The other thing they insist is it will not cause an exodus of capital. Well, for those of you who think it should, nomadcapitalist.com. Hashtag go where you're treated best. Because we're here to say why, after all the taxes you pay. I've been to Montreal. It is incredible that you can be so highly taxed with so many restrictions, so many regulations. Beautiful city, by the way, Montreal, Quebec City, a beautiful city. A beautiful place that has been so taxed and regulated. And then even when you go to invest your money in, let's say, real estate, the tenants have so much power. You have basically no power over any of your wealth there in this beautiful city. And yet there are beautiful cities all around the world. The idea that these politicians don't think that you have anywhere to go. As I've said repeatedly, Gavin Newsom in California, where are you going to go? Millions of different places. 252 sovereign countries and territories, many of which have better tax deals, many of which have beautiful conditions, many of which you can go. You can speak French, you can speak English, you can live your life in peace. And for now, Canadians can simply move out of the country and absolve themselves of their Canadian tax obligations if they want to do it. So anyway, this is the party campaigning for an October 3rd general election. And of course, they want to support health, education, and the fight against climate change. I want one of these politicians just to come out and say, we're just going to blow it at the track. Like, we're wasting it on, we're wasting on some real crap. Now, of course, it's for the kids, it's for education. Somehow education in these places doesn't really get any better, does it? Somehow the taxes go up and the quality doesn't go up with it. And so you come to the places where I'm spending my time, quality has consistently gone up over the years, taxes often don't. They say, this is the politicians who want to tax your wealth, money doesn't grow on trees, we're going to find it. So they're coming out, they're looking for your wealth. Here's what it's going to do. 0.1% for those with net assets of $1 million to $10 million, so that's basically $1,000 paid to the province. Okay, remember, this is just the provincial level. This is like a U.S. state or a territory in some other country having their own wealth tax. What happens when this works, quote unquote, and then the federal government wants to impose it the way that some politicians in the U.S. want to? So every $1 million, you owe them $1,000. If you got 10 million or close to 10 million, you owe them $10,000 a year. So, all right, I suppose as interest rates are going up, you can at least outpace this. You're not going to outpace inflation, keeping your money in a bank, if your money actually stays in the bank and they don't just reach in and grab it. But, you know, just adding 0.1% that you need to add to your annual returns to keep up with record high inflation to actually be able to make a profit. So if you're just keeping your money in a bank account at zero, which I hope you're not doing if you have $10 million, you're losing another 10 basis points every year on every single one of those dollars. Of course, they're going to exempt, because they're not animals, debt. And so if you have a $1.5 million property minus $700,000 mortgage, you're not subject because you're not a millionaire. Fair enough. For those with assets, though, for those of you really nasty, disgusting people out there who have anywhere from 10 to 99 million, the tax rate jumps tenfold to 1%. And so what I'm not clear about is if it's just a band where the first, the first 10 million you pay 10 grand, and then you start getting to the real figures, 1%. I mean, that's like a management fee on a managed fund that you just add in. Right? People say, how much money do you lose by investing in managed funds? Many investors argue because you're paying 1 or 1.25% or even more on some funds. How much do you lose over time? A lot of money. Imagine if you're having a 1% wealth tax, how much harder it's going to be to generate wealth, especially if you're trying to do so in a more passive way. Does this apply to businesses? Are we valuing people's businesses? Are we valuing art? Are we valuing sneaker collections? Who knows? But if you have $10 to $99 million, it's 1%. So if you get $100 million, that's going to be a decent chunk. It's going to be about close to $1 million. And if you're really the scum of the earth, and you have more than $99 million, you're going to pay 1.5%. And so these numbers are lower. In the U.S., they're talking about, in some cases, starting at $100 million and then going up from there. And the billionaires would pay even more, anywhere from 3 to 6%. So the numbers here are lower. I mean, $10 million, especially if we start valuing businesses, if we start valuing homes. Canadian home prices now, according to Goldman Sachs and anyone with common sense, are going to be dropping. So I suppose you'll have the added benefit that your house will be worth less and maybe you'll pay a little bit less in wealth tax. But I mean, who knows what's going to be thrown into these valuations? Most of the wealth taxes that I'm seeing, they're like, yeah, we're throwing it all in. I mean, in some cases, they literally say, yeah, we're throwing it all in. Art, your car collection, everything, that gets thrown into the pot. I think a lot of these politicians, they really don't think that much. It's just like, all right, 10 million, you're a jerk. 99 million, you're a real jerk. All right, and it's like, okay, well, what are the valuations? They don't know business. If they were in business, they'd be running for political office in Quebec. So I'm sure they'll just figure that out as they go, and it'll probably work against you. But $10 million, you're doing well. No one's feeling sorry for you, and you're not feeling sorry for yourself because that's the winning attitude you had to get to $10 million. But you are going to, you have to pay. And I mean, $10 million in this day and age, you started a business. You did all right. Again, maybe you own the business and it has some value. You make $1 million a year. In some industries, that's worth $5, $6, $7, $8 million a year. So with just a little business that makes some money, that employs some people, you could be subject to every year having to pay on this. And so it would be interesting to see what exactly you're going to have to pay on. But they're also going to add, it sounds like a state tax. They're gonna look at changing that. So anyway, more taxes all across the board, and that's what you're looking forward to in Quebec if these folks get in power. So what I always say is whether this particular party gets into power, whether this particular thing gets implemented, it gets into the public's consciousness, especially as inflation creeps up, especially as wages remain somewhat stagnant. Other countries in the world are growing more organically. Countries like Canada are not growing as organically. They're growing based as kind of a legacy brand. That's catching up with people. Therefore, people want this kind of action from politicians. Politicians come out with it. What starts at the fringe becomes closer and closer to the center. Eventually, this will happen. And so, if I'm a Canadian, for all the other reasons you've seen in the last couple of years, I would at least have a residence permit. Maybe you start a company that holds some investments in the UAE or the Cayman Islands or somewhere, and you can turn that into a residence permit somewhere. Maybe if you have $10 million, you go into the Caribbean, it's a nonstop flight, and you get citizenship by investment in a matter of months. Maybe you go through the family tree and you find citizenship that you're entitled to in Europe. Not that that's going to be entirely better, but there are certainly some countries in Europe that are better than Canada. Canada has been one of the most difficult ones in the recent years. Maybe you move some money to another country and you follow all the laws and you do everything properly. But you want to start being diversified. I think especially having a residence permit or a citizenship of a tax-friendly place that's looking forward, not just how much they can take from you to add $2.65 billion to their coffers every year, but how much they can deliver in value and how they can attract you in a competitive environment. Having a residence permit there, whether you set up a company somewhere and just visit once or twice a year, whether you just show that you have income, many Latin American countries will let you get a residence permit on that basis, whether you go all the way to getting citizenship, having that backup plan means that when times really get tough, when this kind of stuff comes in, you have the option to be part of the exodus, which will undoubtedly be, as we've seen in the United States where I'm from, places that impose millionaires taxes, mansions taxes, people do leave. States like Maryland in the United States are not exactly booming these days. Florida's booming, Texas is booming, Idaho's booming, Nevada's booming. They're not taxing millionaires as jerks. And that's perhaps part of why they're booming. They also happen to have more personal freedom. They also happen to have better weather. And so all those same things apply to Canada. Get your Plan B residence and citizenship. And if you decide you want to use it now because you're just tired of living in Canada, then you can do that too.